This is Dan Simons, who is the CEO and founder of Founding Farmers Restaurant, which I know a lot of us have been to and really enjoy and appreciate for its unique way of serving our neighborhoods with wonderful food. Dan Simons is he's also the co-owner of Farmers Restaurant Group, which is a majority owned by American family farmers with a mission to earn farmers a larger scale of the food dollar while delivering thoughtfully sourced, scratch-made food and exceptional hospitality. Farmers Restaurant Group operates 7 restaurants and 1 distillery throughout the DC, Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania areas, and most recently pivoted their business model to include a founding farmers market and grocery, selling everything from prepared dinners to hand sanitizer made in their DC distillery, Founding Spirits. Passionate about the health of the planet, Simons founded the nonprofit Our Last Straw, a business-led coalition working to reduce our reliance on single-use plastics, and is on the advisory board of Conscious Capitalism DC. Thanks again, Dan, for joining us. The rest of you can see he's up on all the social media platforms. So if you want to follow him, please do.
It's a pleasure for me to have the chance to talk to folks who are, somewhere, let's say in the first, quarter or the beginning, or thinking about their career path. I have had a lot of good fortune along the way with some great mentors and great opportunities. And, the restaurant industry has been really good to me. I started at the bottom and worked my way up. And so anytime that I have the chance to, share some information, make a connection, build relationships, I'm all for it. So I promise you, my goal is to make you glad that we spent this time together. I think the burden is on me to keep you interested for an hour. So we'll see if I can do that for you, and know that my focus again is on creating value. And so no matter what your hopes and dreams are, your goals for your career and where you want to go, one of the most powerful things you can have is your network. And so even though we're virtual today, I look at it as we're going to spend an hour together. My hope is that I share some information, then we have some Q&A. And so if it works, you're learning some stuff from me, I'm learning some stuff from you. We all feel like it was a worthwhile hour of our time. And then if I can ever be helpful to you in the future, you saw all my social handles on that first screen. I'm easy to reach. And I will be happy to make the commitment to you that if there's anything I can ever do to help you with your careers or help you along the way or be a sounding board, I'm totally available to do that. So I'll tell you a little bit about, my story. And, as I understand it, the things that are important to all of you, management, leadership, entrepreneurship, maybe some of you have a focus, somewhere in the hospitality industry and this kind of overarching perspective of starting businesses and being successful in a business career, whether you're going to own your own company or climb the ladder in somebody else's company. So I'll try to highlight the things about my story that I think are relevant. I don't necessarily love listening to myself talk, so I will really try to focus on the things that I think can translate and have some value for you. And I've got the chat screen up, and even though I'm Gen X and I'm not a Gen Z and I'm not millennial, I can multitask. So I can talk and I can keep my eye on the chat stream. You can make comments, you can disagree, you can throw stuff in there. And so, if someone is working on a business project and there's something that this conversation can help you with that specific project, great, throw it in there. And so I don't think I'm going to talk for 45 straight minutes and then squeeze in 15 minutes of Q&A. I think we can get more value through some dialogue together as you're reacting to some things I'm saying or sharing what's on your mind. So let me tell you kind of recent history where my company is and a little bit about us. So again, my name is Dan. I'm a restaurateur. It's the only industry I've ever worked in. And as of January 2020, so the beginning of this year, my business partner and I, we had 7 restaurants, over 1,200 employees, did about $85 million a year in annual revenue. So that's where we were, at the beginning of 2020. If you rewind 12 years, 2008, we opened our first Founding Farmers. So in 2008, we had no restaurants, me and my partner. We'd already had one failed restaurant where we'd lost a whole bunch of money that we borrowed from the bank. And as they say in the first round of raising capital, friends, family, and fools. And we lost all of that. So how much money did I put into the company in the beginning? So my first restaurant that failed, I put $25,000 of my own money in, which was pretty much all my savings. I borrowed $40,000 from my parents, and then anybody else I could sort of coerce in. And then we lost all that money, and we borrowed another $600,000 from the bank, which we signed for personally. So we lost all that. So when we opened the first Founding Farmers, I did not put in a penny of my own money. 2 reasons. I had pretty much had no pennies. And I had already experienced losing friends and family's money and losing my own money. And so when we did Founding Farmers, we had the opportunity to use what's called other people's money. And we did that. And it's neither a good thing nor a bad thing. It's just sort of an evolution from if you don't have any, you need other people's. And at some point you do in business want to take risks with other people's money. At the same time, there's always a question. Investors want to know that you've got skin in the game, which is you've got your own money in, or you really got yourself on the line. So that's what we did in 2008 with primarily capital from the North Dakota Farmers Union. We created what was the first Founding Farmers. And I appreciate that some of you know it and love it. That's good. If you ever need help with a reservation, just text me. And so it took us 12 years to get to $85 million in sales. It took us 12 years to get close to a goal we'd set, which was we were going to get our company over $100 million in sales. And then in March of 2020, it took us just a couple of weeks, and we lost 95% of our sales, 95% of our employees, and welcome to COVID world. So it was pretty terrifying. It's still pretty scary. And yet in this last 6 months, we have shown that the things that in our case really matter, company culture, mission, the way that you treat people and build relationships, both inside the company and the relationships that you build with vendors. COVID hit and we were just destroyed. And so you find out who your friends are, who's going to help you, who's going to extend you credit terms, who's willing to work for free, and who's in the face of fear and anxiety, who's ready to go all in with you. And so I think that what we are an example of in COVID world is I like to think in life that sometimes you actually get what you deserve. And so I like to think that karma is a real thing. And if you do right by people along the way, that people will do right by you in return. And so now here we are, whatever that is, 6 months later. And in the past 6 months, we lost 95% of our sales. We have rehired 750 people. We have created new lines of business by launching a market in grocery. We spun up a whole new e-commerce platform. We've created new products like Founding Farmers or Farmers Chocolate. So milk chocolate, dark chocolate. We're doing our own peanut butter cups. And so new products, new product lines. We're spinning up a whole Founding Farmers mail order, gift boxes business. Throughout it all, we've been donating a ton of food. We collaborated with World Central Kitchen. We've been donating to a couple of different pastors in Ward 7 and Ward 8 in DC. So even while we've been hemorrhaging cash, losing money, dealing with our own fears and anxieties, we've still been staying true to our mission, which from the very beginning was to put the mission over profit. And that's really what conscious capitalism is. And so we're still a for-profit company. I'm not ashamed to say that one of our goals is to make money, but that is second to our goal of advocating on behalf of American family farmers, being a market maker for American family farmers, and doing business in a way of which we're proud. I've got 3 young teenage boys, all of whom have spent time working in the restaurant, and I would rather make business decisions that help my kids be the kind of person that I think can make the world a better place than just make as much money as I can. And I can tell all of you as business students, as business people yourselves, business is on the honor system. You will be able to make or take as much money as you want. You will be able to accomplish any level. That's not the question. The question is, how do you do it? And are you willing to sacrifice your ethics or your friendships along the way? Because I think you can see, not to bring up politics, but there's enough examples out there of if you decide that you're just not going to follow any rules, you're not going to follow rules, you're not going to follow laws, you're just gonna be completely self-centered, you can make a ton of money out there in business, but you're going to do it at the expense of everybody else. And so for me, it's not worth it. I want to sleep well at night. And so COVID world is scary as an entrepreneur and a business owner and a citizen and a civilian, but it's less scary because I love my team. I trust the people around me, and I'm glad for the way that we've done business. And whatever happens, tomorrow's going to come, and we'll wake up and we'll get through it. I knew that I wanted to open my own business when I was in college. So let me take you all the way back to some of the things that matter, I think, in like what is my recipe that has gotten me, wherever I am. So my parents are not from this country. I'm first generation American. I think that matters. And for those of you whose parents are from this country, that's fine too. But what I would say is, for me, it has been helpful to understand that America is not at the center of the universe. I think America is remarkable, and I'm appreciative to be here. It clearly has its downsides as well. But for having parents who immigrated to this country and then raised a family here, and then we had the chance to travel a lot internationally, it was always clear to me that the world is a big place and I'm just a speck in it, and my country is just one part of it. And so that always helped me be a good listener. I always understood from the youngest age, people see things differently. Somebody else knows more. Just because somebody isn't speaking English doesn't mean they're either smart or not smart. And so this, I think, for me, the lesson there was like open ears, open mind, open heart. I believe that these are winning ingredients. So those ingredients were sort of gifted to me with parents who weren't from here. I think wherever your family or you is from, you can work on having open ears, an open mind, and an open heart. And then, when you face adversity like COVID world, I think you find that these ingredients are really, really valuable. So I knew I wanted to open my own business in college. My parents were both doctors. So this wasn't like a scrappy, no money immigrant story. It just was a non-American immigrant story. So my parents were doctors. And ironically, I watched how much they work, and I said, well, I don't want a job like that. They're working. They're always on call. They're always working. So, somehow I end up in the restaurant business, which, you can sort of make a parallel, right? Like crazy hard work, I guess, is just in the blood. And I'm thankful for what my parents role modeled. I filed for my first patent when I was 19. I didn't get it. And back then this was filing for patent when there's no real computers, and it's like you're like filing your application on paper. So I had entrepreneurial ideas early. I wrote my first restaurant business plan when I was a senior in college. And then I went to work I graduated from GW with a business degree. And then I went to work for TGI Fridays. So I started working, my first job, I was 14. I was a stock boy in the linens department at a department store. And, I learned to clock in and clock out and do the work. I learned to hide in the linen stock room when my boss wasn't around. And then I figured out which bosses really know how to drive productivity and which bosses weren't very good. So, you take it in, you absorb it. And then I started bartending and working the front desk in restaurants in college. And I just, honestly, I fell in love. And a message that my dad always gave me, my mom too, was do what you love. Do what you love and the money will come. Or it won't come, but it won't matter because you'll be doing what you love, in which case you'll do it really well. And then good things will happen because you'll be happy. And so, I had my parents paid for college. I was very lucky, and I was getting this business degree. And I called my parents. I said, I know what I want to do when I'm going to graduate. I got an offer from TGI Fridays. I'm going to be a restaurant manager. And my folks said, what's that? They weren't judgy or critical. They were just like, that's a job? Is that a career? Like, what do you mean? Don't you already do that? I said, no, I'm a bartender. They're like, well, what is a restaurant manager? They just didn't know. But I said, Dad, you said do what you love. All my other friends are like going to work in these high rises and the office buildings, and it's like boring, and I don't want to do it. And I go to work all the time, and I go to school, and work doesn't feel like work. Like, I'm psyched. I can't believe they pay me to do this. And my dad said, so go for it. So I spent my 20s working for other people. TGI Fridays, and I saw that company go from all scratch cooking and fresh food to totally frozen food, outsourced product. And I saw that transition. I was like, I don't like that. I learned a bit about quality. Then I went to Cheesecake Factory. And when I got to Cheesecake Factory, there were 5 or 6 restaurants. So it was a tiny little company, West Coast. I moved to LA. And I started at Cheesecake, let's say restaurant 6. I left when there were 33 restaurants. So I got to see that company really grow. It's obviously a big monster now. Then I did a startup that was well-funded. And then by the time I was 30, I was just really sick of working for other people. And I said, whatever I do next, I'm doing it on my own. And people say, like, how do you know when you're ready? When's the right time? I think starting a business is sort of like starting a family. There's no right time. Like, you're never perfectly ready. And if you get thrust into it, you'll figure it out. And maybe it'll go well, maybe it won't, but it's always a journey. I mean, my first restaurant, just failed. But that doesn't mean I was a failure. It's just part of the journey, right? Like, this is where I love when the athletes say, whatever. So you take a shot, you miss it. The issue isn't you missed the shot. You got to take it. You got to take your shots. You got to try. Failure isn't about failing today. The question is, what do you do tomorrow with what happened yesterday, right? Do you get back up and get after it and get to it and apply your lessons learned? So, if you get knocked down and you stay down, I guess that's losing. If you get knocked down and you fail and you get back up and you get after it, or you adjust, or you try something new, great. So working for other people for a decade was really good for me. It's an important part of my story. I learned from other companies. I had some great bosses. I had some awful bosses. And I learned to not take for granted what it takes to actually create these companies. And so when I went off, so the guy who had been one of my mentors and bosses, he became my business partner. And I just tried to keep those lessons close to my heart, which is I did the work for a decade with my hands, with my mind, I wasn't out there. I didn't have a fancy job. A lot of my friends had cooler, fancier jobs. The lawyers were out of law school, people working for big consulting firms, and I was like, if you looked at it from the outside in, I was bussing tables and cleaning up baby vomit off the floor in restaurants and, like just doing all the stuff that you do in a restaurant. But I was really learning, and I would encourage all of you that whatever your dream is career-wise, aspiration-wise, whether you want to work for someone else, start a company, you're into fashion, hospitality, retail, tech, services, whatever. The hard part isn't having ideas. The hard part is building mastery. Go somewhere and do the work. Put in the time. When somebody tells me at 21 years old that they've got a sweet job with a consulting firm, honestly, I think to myself, really, why? You don't know anything. So you want someone to pay you to be a consultant? What do you know? Now, if you happen to be a prodigy and you know something that you've actually done it and you know what works, great. But I think before you're an expert in something, you really gotta do it. And then I think I took the experience of growing up, the things that my parents instilled in me, caring about the planet, caring about community, family matters. I'm the youngest of 4 kids. And when I just said, I can't work for anybody else anymore. I'm ready. I was just ready to criticize myself instead of criticizing my boss. I was ready to have the things that I thought were stupid or could be done better. I was ready to have the mistakes be mine. That's when I knew, like, okay, I'm ready to take my shot. So I combined, I guess, who I am, who my parents influenced me to be. And I combined that with the business goals. And I do think that's kind of like being a social entrepreneur. Certainly that's like a more contemporary term right now. We didn't have that. I'm 50 years old. So just to like put a date on this, right? I got out of college in 1992. I think at this point in hindsight, yeah, I do consider myself a social entrepreneur. And this is what conscious capitalism is. And this is why I'm one of the founding members of conscious capitalism in the DC chapter. I think there is an amount of money that is enough. And then I like sharing and creating career paths and opportunities for other people. And, my partner and I have shown that is, there's other ways to approach business, but it's a successful way to approach business, to believe that the planet is a stakeholder. The community is a stakeholder. Your employees are stakeholders. And it's just a different view than the raw capitalists who think there's one stakeholder, which is the investor. Maybe they think there are 2 stakeholders, the investor and the customer. And I don't think that way. So those are some of the things I think that all combined, it's really helped in COVID world and needing to pivot, having a great team. I can tell you, when my first restaurant failed, the depression was awful. And I mean like straight up depression, like depression, anxiety, vulnerability. It was awful. I had 2 little kids, a mortgage. I'd spent the prior 3 years with my wife and I living in my mother-in-law's basement. We thought it'd be a year. Oh, just let us live in the basement for a year. We'll get this business started. We finally save up enough money, grow this business. We were building our consulting firm. We got the restaurant going. We moved out of the basement after 3 years. We bought a house. Our restaurant fails. We're, pennies away from filing personal bankruptcy. And I'd wake up in the morning, and I'm like a born optimist. I'm in a pretty good mood. I'm an optimistic person. Like I can usually find a silver lining. I'd open my eyes, like my usual moment of like, oh, good, I'm alive, here I am. And then just like the cloud of failure and depression relating to, a business failure that put my family in financial harm's way. And so here's what I can tell you. Just keep going. That's it. Just keep going. There is almost nobody out there, and I would say nobody, but I don't know anybody's story, who you can look at and say, maybe you want to get where they are. You've got a vision to do something. There's nobody out there that hasn't had some of these awful, difficult experiences. The difference is I just kept going. I'm no better than you. I'm no smarter than you. I don't have anything that qualifies me to have necessarily what we have. And by the way, as COVID shows, you can have all this stuff. This is why, like, I've never claimed that I'm successful, because I've always known how vulnerable it is. And I don't know if my company's going to survive this. I think it will. And regardless, I will just keep going. So those are some of my lessons and kind of some of my journey. And I'll get to some of your comments in the chat, but so I think it comes down to leadership, and I have a definition of leadership. I'm going to read it to you because this is like my own definition that I've written. But a leader is the mirror in which his or her or their team is inspired to look. And in this mirror, they learn to find everything they need to make progress on their own journey to greatness. The mirror delivers love in all its forms: tough, fair, caring, and is always crystal clear and mirror sharp. The source of that love is the leader's personal commitment to excellence, combined with the knowledge that winning alone is not winning at all. So this is my definition of leadership. I hold myself to it. Thank you, Nathan. I'll take the applause. And what I want to share with you that is, decide what your definition of leadership is. Decide, thanks, Marisol. I love a little applause. That's nice. Decide your view. Like, how do you define it? What's a leader? Write it down, put some detail in it, decide who you are, and then stay true to that. And when you're doing that and you work in a company or you have a job where the way you do it isn't embraced or supportive, take note of that, keep grinding, and when you have the chance, make a change. Look for environments that align with your values and your principles and the things that inspire you. And then eventually, I hope for you sooner rather than later, but eventually you will put yourself into the right environment. It might be one someone else has created, and it might be one you have to create. But the reason I like to write down my definitions and remind myself of them and tape them up on the wall is there's all these scenarios where you can really get knocked off your path and you can get led astray. You know, someone can kind of woo you down a road with money, or someone can, wine and dine you about an opportunity, or pressure can force you to kind of do something or make a decision, or, some of these toxic work environments can sort of coerce you to stay silent when you know that courage in speaking up is who you are inside, but you don't feel safe to do that. So I think by getting the thoughts out of your head and getting them on paper and honing your definitions throughout your career and revising them as you evolve and grow as a leader, for me, that's been one of the techniques that I've used. And it is, I would say, like a vision board. I think you can do it with words. I think you can do it in that sort of visual layout style and create that mirror of what you want yourself to be. And, so my thing is I knew I wanted to lead and help grow other people because I knew that would grow me. And that's why and I've always had this balance of head and heart with approach to leadership and business decisions. So I think you can be firm, fair, and nice. I think you can be hardcore and intense and caring. I think you can seek to understand and be a good listener and be firm and hold people accountable and make sure that people understand you as well. So let me get to a few of your specific questions. So the mission of helping farmers really came about because that was our source of capital. And so had I got different investors, I was not already on a personal mission to help farmers. It turned out that the North Dakota Farmers Union wanted a restaurant concept to help them spread their message of independent family farming. So they were looking for restaurateurs. my partner Mike and I had a vision to do our own restaurant, and I've definitely always been into the environment, into the planet, and at least I would say by my mid to late 20s into health and nutrition and clean food. And so we sort of got lucky. The farmers found us, we found the farmers, and it was just really a great match. And so that's how that mission of helping farmers was created. Is our company international? So I do own 2 companies. Along the way with our restaurants, failures and successes, we also have a restaurant and hospitality consulting firm. It's great to be a consultant because, like I said, even if you don't know anything, you can just say you're a consultant. So we started there. Now, 15 years later, we've built that into a pretty successful boutique consulting firm. And yes, well, I've done projects. I've done restaurant and hospitality consulting projects in China, Korea, Saudi Arabia, which is a super interesting place to visit. Talk about having your eyes open to like, there's just a big differences in the world out there. So our restaurants are not international, and I don't see taking Founding Farmers international. Founding Farmers, and I think I saw a question about how large would I want to be. If Founding Farmers ends up with, 250 restaurants, it'll be because we sold it to some big company who did that. It's not really in the DNA of what we have built. What we do is hard. It's not like rapidly scalable. And so to roll out and open restaurants all over the country with our complex supply chain and cooking from scratch and doing it with head and heart, those words sort of conflict with rapid, efficient scale. So I don't see us going international. I don't see licensing the brand to somebody else. And now I'm reading that second question from staff in there. Is there a point where it might be so large it loses its culture? Yeah, absolutely. I think businesses and maybe people, there's a DNA, there's a seed from which it grows, and the roots need to be as deep and strong as the visible growth on top. And I think if you don't have the roots big enough that are built to sustain a massive thing, eventually it collapses on top of itself. So that's my view of sort of keeping the company the right size. Our biggest innovational change. Yeah, so this, Christopher, we went from being a restaurant doing 95% dine in and 5% to go to creating a totally separate but integrated market and grocery with 1,000 SKUs on an e-commerce platform. And we decided that on March 17th. So on March 16th, we took the hardest kick in the teeth I've ever taken. On March 17th, we woke up and said, this is not going to be 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And anybody who thinks that is, a liar or a fool. We need to create a business model that works in COVID world. We knew people needed to eat. We knew restaurant food and menus is probably too expensive. And so we created an affordable market and grocery that people could order online and pick up at the curb, or that we could deliver. We decided that on March 17th. We opened that business on April 4th. On April 2nd, we opened the website to take pre-orders, and we took $60,000 worth of pre-orders in 48 hours. That is the biggest innovational change that I could ever have imagined. My team worked, like when we say 7 days a week, 17 hours a day is not an exaggeration. And everybody pulled together, from the chefs and the frontline workers to our marketing team to, we didn't have a digital team or an e-com team, but everybody put on new hats and we figured it out. So that was our biggest thing. The sort of follow-up question that you had there, Christopher, how should more businesses turn to social sustainability? So sustainability, by its definition, means it lasts. I know we use sustainability in the terms generally of green, right? So like that the planet could last or that our health could last. So when I think your question, right, essentially, how should more businesses, let's say, do more good? right? And turn to some mission-driven activity, I think they have to attach it to a business model. Because if all you do is have an idea to save the world, but you don't have an economic model, a business model, then your ideas about sustainability aren't sustainable unless you've got a really rich aunt or uncle, or you can get a nonprofit that has is funded permanently by the Gates Foundation. So I would encourage businesses to look at where their business can attach to a mission. And whether it's environmental or social justice or look, the world is such a mess. It's pretty easy to find something to work on, frankly, right? Like just look at the front page of the newspaper, look on Twitter. There's all sorts of problems out there that need to be solved, but you can't solve them all. And solving them all isn't sustainable. Pick one, find a way to attach it to your profit model such that the more good sustainability work you do, it drives your revenue or it drives your profit. And now your company has cash flowing into it so that you can do right by people and do more of the good things. Let's see, what advice do you have on finding your passion? So first of all, trust yourself. Don't worry about everybody else's passion, and stop comparing yourself to anybody else who's found their thing, because everybody around you who might sound like they found their thing, 10 years later, it might turn out to not be their thing, right? Half the people who get married end up divorced. So if everybody else is married and you're not married, don't rush into it, right? Like, stay true, keep your standards high, don't worry about anybody else. And I think to find your passion, your career, like, listen to yourself. What makes you smile? What do you enjoy? What interests you? What challenges have you had that actually the challenge itself motivates you to tackle the challenge, right? Because why do you want to sign up for something really challenging unless you're actually inspired and motivated to win at that challenge? So finding your passion is a journey. I think having great listening skills to yourself, talking to folks out there, and then put yourself out there. You got to do stuff. How would you know if construction management or restaurant service or starting a fashion company is your passion unless you get exposed to it? And look, there's a lot in my business that I actually happen to like bussing tables, but I don't like scraping gum off the bottom of tables. I don't like having guests when they yell at me, but you don't have to love 100% of the job. What you need to do is love the majority of it such that it inspires you to deal with the rest of the bullshit that you have to deal with, right? And so it's frankly sort of like parenting. I mean, I've got 3 kids. I got to tell you, there's a lot about it not to like, but there is enough about it to love that you say, okay, I'm all in and I'm doing this. And the part that's annoying or frustrating, it doesn't really matter because the core of it is what inspires you. And, I love that question, how do you find your passion? Because it's sort of annoying when you listen to other passionate people talk about their stuff and you're like, well, yeah, I want to be like that. So how do I find it? So I think that the nutshell of my answer is put yourself out there and do stuff. And everything you're doing that isn't lighting your fire, be glad. Okay, I'm learning. I did that for a while. It didn't light me up. Great. Next. Move on, right? It's the same thing in relationships. How do you know when you're in a great relationship? It's more about knowing when you're not and ending it and moving on and leaving yourself open. And I think that's how you can discover what's next. Would I ever bring a product international to give more awareness? So we do work on some international advocacy topics with farmers. Like I mentored a farmer in West Africa that I got connected to through the World Farmers Organization and helped him set up actually, and he used the name Founding Farmers. It was like a roadside stand. He was a farmer. And I explained like, look, if you added value to your crop and you can sell it and you can make that money as opposed to just selling your crop, cook it, add value, add a sauce and, sell it for more. So I don't see myself growing the business internationally, but when I get the chance to do some international advocacy work, independent farming is a human global topic. And so when I have opportunities, I do like to be exposed to it. I don't have a big enough vision to think about how to do something with the business like that. But anytime I can get our brand or myself in an opportunity to help, I'm always interested in that. How do you know when the company is the right size? Michelle, I think this is about making sure that along the way you are measuring leading indicators about how you've defined success. So for example, in our company, one of the ways we define success is through the employee surveys that we do, and we measure culture. And so I know what happens when you grow too fast, culture slips, and all of a sudden, it was easy when we had a couple of restaurants and I knew everybody's name. I don't know everybody's name anymore, and that worries me. So unless I can create like a layer of managers and a layer of leaders that can really deliver the culture and deliver the employee experience, which I can then measure through the employee surveys, the minute I see those surveys drop, I know, don't grow. And so what my partner and I say is like, we're measuring our performance with what it's like to work for us and what it's like to invest in us and the good things we're able to accomplish. And the minute some of those things drop, we know go slow. So for us, look, 12 years, 7 restaurants, we're going slow. But by a lot of comparisons to us, we're going as fast as we are good enough. And the minute that it's your company or you're sitting in the boardroom and people are talking about scale and rapid growth and all of these things, total available market, you should say, are we still going to be who we want to be if we do that? And are we sure? And do we need to invest in 700 new salespeople, or do we need to invest in 300 new salespeople and 50 new people to support training and the employee experience? And maybe we ought to pioneer a 4-day work week before we pioneer 600% growth. So those are some of the ways that I guess I look at that kind of growth. Question about food system, logistics, and scale. Nathan, do you have a...
Yeah, I figured I could. It's kind of long, so I'll just unmute myself. First off, thanks for talking to us. I've been to the downtown Founding Farmers. That cornbread is legit.
Thank you.
But my question is, I'm very interested in food systems and like hunger in our low-income communities in the DMV. And it's super interesting to me that you talk about how during COVID-19, you guys have started these markets, farm to table, grocery store kind of situation. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how that could be applied to a larger scale of like how people could change the way that they actually get their food on a daily basis. Because I feel like one of the big things that we learned from COVID-19 is just how fragile our super efficient, super central food system is. So yeah, I was just wondering about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so Nathan, you've clearly done some homework on this because you touched on, yes, the food system is fragile in some ways. It is also incredibly resilient in some ways. And it's so centralized and it is so dominated by just a few players. It's highly efficient. It generates great returns, does feed a lot of people, and it has massive problems, right? I want to say that COVID will have exposed enough fractures, exposed enough problems that we will be forever different because people are learning about this and will work on solutions. I am worried that humans have a short memory. The Spanish flu pandemic of 1919 was followed by the Roaring '20s. How good were they at washing their hands when they were all hammered in the speakeasies? I don't know. And so I worry that while we're all immersed in COVID and we're focused on these issues now, or talking about them now, you get a vaccine, hopefully, right? Good vaccine, great therapeutics, lots of things. We want life to go back to normal. I just hope, and this is what I'm counting on your generation to do, stay passionate, right? Because the next pandemic is coming, the next problems are coming, the injustice and the inequality isn't going away unless you make it go away. There are opportunities. I would tell you that the number one thing, if you want to work on one issue to change the food system in the direction you're saying, and it's not a sexy answer, antitrust legislation. Okay, so it is the monopolies that really are the problem. So when 3 or 4 companies can consolidate and control all of the food, the hog processing or the beef processing in the country, they have one stakeholder, investor return. They don't give a shit about anybody else, right? I mean, look, they're just like killing their workers. They don't care. And
literally killing their workers.
Right. Literally killing their workers, right? Without any sorts of safety or regard or transparency. They are allowed and enabled to do that because we don't have antitrust enforcement. So if you could break those companies up, not let companies get that big, you would then inherently end up with a decentralized system, which would give you regional food processing, regional opportunities, which I think would then lead to some of the sexier, more fun things to talk about, which is like, food access and affordability and more co-op programs. And look, there's plenty of profit to be made once you decide you don't need to hoard it all for yourself. And that's where I love sort of the ideas of food co-op programs. And I think these things should be regional. This is also why I'm cautious when folks say to me like about scale and whatever. It's like, you know what? Do we need another national chain? Like really? Because, I guess you can tell I'm relatively progressive. I just think that at some point, scale in some businesses is inherently a problem because it ends up with one stakeholder. So, but again, I'm optimistic there because I think we could get the right antitrust stuff, and I do think that could open up a wave. Look, we need good regulation. We don't need stupid regulations, and it's hard to get it right. But a totally unregulated food production system is a disaster for independent farmers, a disaster for the consumer, and it's good for the few stockholders and the executives of the few companies that own the market. All right, I won't ramble on too long because you can tell I'm fired up by that, certainly. Let's see, how will we be different when we open up again? So Rebecca, I think you're gonna see that the technology changes stick, contactless payment, guests looking at menus on their phones instead of being handed menus. So right now, by using a QR code and having you pull up the menu on your phone, I can probably save $3,000 a month as a restaurant expense between printing and replacing and cleaning menus. And then when I want to change prices, I can just do it digitally, and I can do pricing on demand or variable pricing or time of day pricing. So I think you'll see, payment and ordering. We're going to keep some aspects of the market in grocery. So I think, I've looked at the grocery stores just make a fortune. You got grocery stores whose sales are up 200%, 300%. Good for them. They're supplying their communities with food. So I think I want to be a more diversified food and beverage provider. So I think we'll be different because we're going to meet the customer wherever they are. You want to be at the dining room table in your house. You want to be at the dining room table in our restaurant. You want to be on the patio. You want to be driving at the curb. I can only get to you via the FedEx or the UPS guy. We'll do mail order. I think those will be some of the things. I'm hopeful that one of the differences that will permanently stick is health and safety. This is a place that that my group had an advantage. We've always had a full-time employee or more than one whose job was safety and food safety. But restaurant workers who work when they're sick anyways, or it's just you come to work and you kind of have a cold, our industry has done that. I grew up with my career doing that. It's stupid, and I'm glad now we have paid time off and paid sick leave. I hope that our industry and any industry that deals with the public, I hope these changes become permanent. People should be able to stay home when they're sick. People should be able to be paid on, maternity and paternity leave to be home with their kids. I think this movement of a more, a more balanced treatment of the workforce. I hope that these things stick. So those are some of the things that'll be different. Certainly with my group, some of that we already did that anyways, but we try to put out, like I work outside our four walls, like on single-use plastics and these other issues, because I want to try to make more of an impact than just what we can do with our company. I heard a few restaurant owners that you usually become married to the restaurant, so you're very involved with every part of it. Yeah, so Joseph, here's the thing. There's really two ways to succeed in this industry, but there's only one that fits my definition of success. You have to have a high level of talent focusing on the business all the time. You can either do that yourself and work 7 days a week and be married to the restaurant and that's it, or you can figure out how to train and develop and delegate and empower and grow a team around you who can deliver that level of expertise. So if you're not a good delegator and you're not a good trainer, then you are signing up to be married to your restaurant. And I don't advocate for that, because I think there's a lot of trade-offs and you'll miss a lot of stuff in life. Don't get me wrong, I spend a lot of time working, but it doesn't feel like work. I still can't believe I'm getting paid. I mean, I'm not getting paid very much in COVID world, but that question, and I think that's a mistake that some folks get. They get into it and then, they don't see their kids and they don't do anything else. And I think it's an unfair indictment of the industry, because I think it's more of a commentary on the lack of training and development and teaching and the lack of excellent professional workplaces. And, historically, the industry doesn't treat women properly, and so you lose the female talent. Look at who runs my company. More women than men run my company. Why? Because we let talent rise to the top. And so I'm in my home office today, 7 restaurants are running, and my 3 kids are out there bouncing off the walls or playing Xbox, and I'll be home tonight. So it is doable, but it's about delegation and leadership and talent. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I want to see if we can knock out these questions. Do you think the changes curb? Yes, I do think things like curbside continue after COVID, because you know what? It's really convenient. Why do you want to get out of your car if you don't want to get out of your car? So I think anything that is speed and convenience, I think those things last. If I could do it all over, would I change anything? So Randy, the $1 million that my partner and I lost, that we borrowed in our first restaurant, that took us 8 years to pay back, would I change it? I wouldn't, because I think all those lessons learned and all those scars and feeling that kind of depression and anxiety and self-doubt, it gets you there. And that's why I can say it is the journey. I haven't made any egregious mistakes. I think if I've ever hurt anyone, then I would do that differently. To my knowledge, I don't think I ever have. So I don't have any big regrets, and all of the stupid decisions I've made or errors, or with hindsight, I'm like, no, you know what? I'm good with that. Competitive advantage. Well, how do I pronounce your name? Leonie? You must be on mute somewhere. Well, Leonie, I was going to ask you, after hearing me talk for the last hour to answer your questions, what do you think our competitive advantage is? So I'll answer it. I think it's our equation that so heavily is weighted towards valuing people, I think that's our competitive advantage. I don't think it's the name Founding Farmers. I don't think it's the recipe for cornbread, even though with the honey butter, that is like straight fire, as my kids would say. But so for us, it's about being people first. Do I have any advice on network? Yeah, and put yourself out there. People hit me up on LinkedIn, people ask questions, and every now and then you run into someone who's actually willing to help you. So like put yourself out there, shake hands. Even if you're an introvert, force yourself to like do that and say to people like, hey, this is hard for me. I'm an introvert. It's a little scary to ask for help, but I'd love to spend 5 minutes with you. And do it from an authentic place of wanting to connect with people. I think the networking where it's like, oh, I'm hoping to meet someone who can help me isn't, in my view, the ideal way. It's more like, I want to meet people because even though I don't know what I have to offer, like the only way I can find out how I can help other people is to be connected. And so I might be here in my career and someone else might be here and it might seem great to be connected, but we all need help and we all need different things from each other. I mean, by all of you showing up tonight, you gave me something. I'm choosing to be here. I'm obviously getting something out of this. And so believe and trust that networking is a two-way street. You're creating value and, just put yourself out there. And yes, it is required to have a successful business. I run into all sorts of crazy, difficult business challenges right now: political, legal, financial, strategic, culinary, supply chain, parenting. And I have a lot of people I can call and ask for help and lean on.
This was just remarkable. I think that those who are with us tonight would totally agree that you gave more than 5 minutes of your time to with us tonight. It's been really, really wonderful. And I can't wait to taste your chocolates and some of the other new ventures that you're starting to embark in.